Hello, welcome to the Black C-Suite Challenges and Opportunities from the Controllers Council. My name is Brian Kaczarski, Chief Accounting Officer of Grubhub, member and frequent contributor to the Controllers Council. I'm so excited to be here today. We have an absolute all-star cast to discuss today. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce our panelists, Kofi Bruce, Chief Financial Officer of General Mills, Jerry Raphael, Chief Financial Officer of Stack Overflow, and our panelist and moderator, Sarah Harris, General Counsel of the accounting firm Armanino. I will now turn things over to Sarah Harris to tell you about today's agenda. Sarah, you're up.
All right, thanks, Brant. I love the enthusiasm. I feel super jazzed. I love it. Well, so good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm honored to be here with the Controllers Council today to talk about a really important topic. So, as Brant mentioned, my name is Sarah Harris. I am currently General Counsel of Armanino. I've been the General Counsel of 2 accounting firms, 1 Major League Baseball team, and been an associate and a partner at multiple large law firms in the Midwest and West Coast. So that's my life story in a nutshell. But today, today I'm partnering with Controllers Council for some real conversation about the lack of Black executives in company C-suites and the accounting and finance industries more broadly. So definitely a topic very close to my heart and really important. So thanks to the Controllers Council for putting this together, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. Here's a quick look at today's agenda. We're going to talk about sponsors briefly, dive into our discussion with the panel, and then we're going to take your questions. So we want today to be interactive. We want you to engage. If you have questions, please do type them in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. Quick administrative matter is that this webcast is being recorded and will be posted on the Controllers Council website in the next 24 hours. And a link will be shared with attendees by email. So you can relive all of the highlights later if you would like. So of course, sponsors are the key to existence, right, for all organizations. So these are the sponsors that help Controllers Council, so huge thanks to them. So it's Bill.com, fully digitized AP and AR, no in-person approvals or paper needed, various convenience, especially during COVID times. Flowcast, a financial close management software and the controller's best friend. And Armanino, a top 25 accounting and technology consulting firm. And we at Armanino, we strive to be a strategic business partner to the accounting and finance industry. So I want to start briefly by framing the problem using some telling statistics. So quick caveat, words do matter, so I do want to give you some context. So I identify as a Black woman with a capital B, and so that's the word that I generally use to describe myself. And people like me, but I am not offended by the use of African American, and I know there are others who prefer that term, so we may use the terms interchangeably today. So even though we represent approximately 13% of the US population, we'll know more after the census this year, right? So 13% of the population, but we're only 3.3% of executives or senior leaders in Fortune 500 companies are Black. So that is a pretty sad number. Even sadder, only three Black CEOs in Fortune 500 companies remain. So the CEO of Tapestry just stepped down last week. So we literally are losing ground in the month of July 2020. Also note that all 3 of them are Black men. Only 2 Black women have ever led Fortune 500 companies, and the most recent was an interim CEO in 2019. So sort of dismal numbers there. Even sadder, less than 1%. So it's 0.7% of CPAs are Black, according to NABA, the National Association of Black Accountants. What is striking about this stat is that while Latinx and Asian CPA percentages have grown healthily over the last few decades, the extremely low percentage of Black CPAs, right around that 1% mark, has remained relatively unchanged for decades. So something that needs to be worked on. And I just actually spoke earlier today about a friend of mine who works at the AICPA who talked about, they've really tried to focus on this issue and increase the pipeline for the accounting industry among Black students. So they're really interested in ideas and efforts. So now that we're depressed about the bad numbers, right? Dismal numbers. But Kofi and Jerry are here and they're doing it, right? They're living it. They're showing us it can happen. So let's jump in with them. So Kofi, I'd like to start with you. Can you give us sort of the brief snapshot of your career background and then share with us an example of where you experienced racism or bias in the workplace?
Sure. So let me just back up. I am 6 months into my tenure as the Chief Financial Officer at General Mills, and proud to be at that company. I've been there 11 years in a variety of finance roles. Prior to that, most recently as the corporate controller. So that is probably most apt for this audience and noteworthy because of the places that internal succession happens for chief financial officers, controller is at the top of the list in the control function. So I think this is an important discussion for us as we think about the pipeline to feed future C-suite executives, in particular in finance. If we have so few African Americans or Blacks in accounting, which is generally required to be in the control function, that cuts off a pretty important avenue of access and development for future chief financial officers. I am by extraction a Ghanaian. My father was born and raised in Ghana and Nigeria. So I also spent a part of my childhood and upbringing there. So I am African. I am also consider myself to be African American because most of my upbringing happened in the States, and my experience as an American has been that. So I am comfortable with any configuration of Black, African American, or African, and depending on where I am, it may be any and all of those. So I would just say, it's hard to pick out any one thing, but I can talk to you about a variety of experiences that have happened to me along the way in my development, in my professional development. One of the most sort of searing of which was kind of probably as I was entering the workforce for the second time, coming out of my MBA program, and I think the certainty with which one of my MBA classmates essentially asserted that I had gotten a certain grade in class as a gift, and his presumption that he had somehow earned and was even in a position to judge objectively a better grade. And I think as I think about growing up, even in high school, some of the early things around access to classes such as AP classes in my high school in Midland, Texas, largely were bequeathed to people who came from the right families and the right backgrounds, which, if you know anything about our country, generally tends to be people who know each other, and because of the way socioeconomics work in our country and are largely articulated along race, that meant that by and large those classes were accessible or more accessible to people who were white, regardless of academic merit or achievement. So I had transferred in just before high school started and was in honors level, AP level type classes before I came to Midland, and I had to fight mightily to get out of remedial English. You know, and I ultimately, you know, sort of that experience was part of the crucible that drove me. I was already achievement oriented, but that drove me, frankly, to feel I needed to prove to the various members of the school administration that I was very capable, and I graduated at the very top 3% of my class. I ultimately got accepted to every one of the 11 schools I applied to, and you know, went to Stanford. And some of the very same people who blocked or made it hard for me to get into those classes I needed to advance, were also trying to tell me at the end that they were behind me all the way. So you know, I will just tell you, it is always that pull and tug of making sure and feeling at times like you may need to prove yourself more to dispel any doubt that you did anything but earn it. The level of perfection that I think you put on yourself and that I put on myself to show up, and it shows up in a lot of ways even still today. Things such as I think as an African American male, I'm very hypersensitive to my public emotional range. I don't think I can get angry in the same way as white peers, male or female for that matter, in the workplace and professional setting, because I think the context and the social context of Black males in America makes that a very different thing for me. So I do find those are the things that I think are, you know, kind of beneath the surface that are maybe less visible. It isn't maybe the days where we're barred outright, or people make absolutely obnoxious, pernicious, malicious comments, or do things overtly, but it is a lot of the little subtle things along the way that just come from being Black in this society and then coming into an environment that is mostly white, and where the rules that govern whether you advance are by and large set just by the fiat of the people who are there, not malice, but because that's the way it has worked. So that's what I would point to, and I'm happy to go deeper as we get into the panel.
Yeah, Kofi, definitely. I think you talk about the subtle things, and I do. I want to get to sort of the death by 1,000 cuts, right? That that leads to some of these dismal numbers that we're seeing. But Jerry, I want to get to you and understand your background, and because I think you too went from controller to CFO. So want to hear about that, but also about sort of some of your experiences of racism or bias.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have very some of the things that Kofi was saying really struck a bell with me. Our backgrounds are not exactly similar in a sense, but our experiences and how the world digests us are definitely similar. And so for me, I come from the accounting side of the world. I'm a CPA. You know, spent about 10 years in public accounting, and then held a number of positions in industry. You know, mostly as a controller. The last 5 years I've been at Stack Overflow, a technology company here in New York City, and essentially got promoted from within, from controller over to CFO. And you know, as Kofi was talking, one of the things that kind of struck me, I did not plan to go back to like high school, but it just reminded me of a story when I was growing up in an AP biology class. Before I became a CPA, I thought I was going to become a doctor, and so that was really my life aspirations. And I was in a class, and I remember I took an exam, it might have been a midterm or something like that, and I got a really good grade. And I remember the teacher came over to me when they handed out the test, and he said, "Listen, I need you to take this test over. There's no way you got this grade, and you're gonna come to my office tomorrow, sit in front of me, and take this test over." I'd gotten something like a 92 or 93, something like that. The next day I went in, took the test, and got like a 97. And he looked at me and he said, "Hey, you barely pay attention in class. How is it that you actually can get this grade?" And you know, looking back on it now, I honestly don't think that it was anything that I did wrong, as if I wasn't paying attention. I think it was because I was one of the only black students in the class, and he was surprised that I actually was able to achieve that type of grade on what is essentially a very difficult class at that point in time. So um, just something that comes to mind. But when you translate that into the corporate sense, there's a lot of that, where folks underestimate, or folks come with certain types of assumptions about you, or certain preconceived ideas. And sometimes it's to your advantage, because you underestimate it and you over deliver in a sense, and folks seem to be really happy. But at the same time, it could work against you in a variety of different ways.
Yeah, I think that's right. In thinking about this question, I was thinking about, when I am faced with a situation at work where I feel like I'm being treated inappropriately or unfairly, or someone's making an assumption about me, an inappropriate assumption about me. I take that moment as a woman of color. I always take that moment like, is this because I'm Black? Is this because I'm a woman? And I was thinking about the other day that I really do tend to put it in the woman bucket as much as possible, because somehow it's less hurtful or something. I don't know. It's very interesting, I think, though, how we react to these things and internalize them, right, for positive or negative, like Kofi and Jerry both sort of using it as inspiration to kick butt and take names and leave everyone impressed in their wake. But yeah, craziness. So Kofi, I want to circle back. So you were talking about sort of some of the things that are, that have created these bad numbers. Like, why aren't there more Black people in the C-suites? You raised the important issue of sort of fighting these subtle battles sort of every day of your life and career, and always having to do better and work harder and do more to be seen as, deserving your spot or equal. And so I did sort of want to talk about that a little bit. And, we certainly, I think there's a lot of talk in society right now about racism, and that's important. And obviously, where we have any, overt racism, we absolutely want to address it, but also where racism is functioning through systems, right? Unintended systems. And also the idea of sort of unconscious bias, right? And that we're all sort of making assumptions about each other and putting each other in buckets that make us feel better, but it's actually negatively impacting those people that we're doing that to, and sort of the need for us all, of all colors, right, and all genders, to be more thoughtful about those kind of things. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that is a very apt observation. And I think the way that it plays out practically is, in every company, there's a generally similar process for promotion and advancement and review of talent. And I think those things can seep into a perspective on what a leader looks like. If you think about what it means to be Black in America, a lot of times you're in your own country and you in so many subtle ways are reminded that you don't belong here, right? So what is the experience maybe that Jerry had with this test is like, well, you don't have any business getting a score like this, right? You don't belong in these classes. You don't necessarily look like the model of what a leader looks like. And it is not while it is a function of bias, right? I want to make sure that I don't drive by this and leave everybody thinking it's just because there are evil people in the world. The way the brain works and the way that people integrate messages from society, we are all feeding in the same set of messages. So the model of what a leader looks like comes down to a whole bunch of things that are in play long before you show up at the work site. Where you went to school, how you talk, do you have an accent or not? I think there are a lot of things that we all like to go into the workplace and say, I go in, I do a good job, and that's sufficient. But the reality is, the workplace has always worked on, you know, knowing people, having people to sponsor and get behind you. And so I think those things matter at least as much. And so if that essentially is a club that you know has been closed for a long time, and the model generally looks the same and is generally white and male, you can understand why we end up here, because the self-reinforcing pattern of promoting people that look like you or talk like you or work like you is kind of the whole point of diversity is to actually broaden the aperture, to start thinking more broadly about, okay, how can I unleash the potential of the people in my organization who aren't like me or who think differently, because we actually, you know, we've done all the studies are there. We're well past the point where we should have to be making a business case for diversity. But the reality is, you know, you probably can't make it enough. Organizations with diversity do perform better financially, right? And part of that is the function of the quality of ideas. I mean, it's easier to market to diverse consumer or customer bases if you have a diverse workforce. So I would just challenge, you know, as I think about, you know, the world outside doesn't stop at the door of the corporation you enter, and then there's this completely separate culture. The reality is people bring that in with them every day. It impacts the way they interact. And frankly, if you're African American right now and you're watching what's going on certainly in our city, what happened with the murder of George Floyd, it is hard not to bring that into the workplace because you're a human being. I'm a human being. I'm a citizen of this country. I'm a proud citizen, frankly, of this country, even despite of all those things. And those, you know, there's always some level of can I talk about this at work? You know, so just know that I think that the challenge is sort of extra for the people around you who maybe come from diverse backgrounds, because there's always a couple layers of codes that they are trying to work through as they show up, in addition to doing a good job. And so the aperture needs to be wider. There needs to be empathy and understanding for the fact that, you know, everybody's got a story of their own that they're coming to the table with that can impact how effective they are if those things aren't at least honored and people aren't allowed to bring their full self to work. And that's one of the reasons why I've stayed at General Mills as long as I have, because I've felt that I've been able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully companies are getting the message that we do need to let people have these conversations at work. We do need to talk about the real world at work, because it is part of allowing people to bring their whole selves to the workplace, which is, I think, just such an important part of how we're all going to be able to attract and keep talent going forward, especially, I mean, millennials, Gen Zers. I mean, these people, like, they get it. Time's up. They don't understand why we're still talking about it. You know, they're like, they think we're dinosaurs and we got to get over it. Like, yes, times have changed. Things are different. We're open. Let's talk about it. So, and I don't know, I learned a lesson in June that, you know, I was so scared about, can we have, you know, company-wide conversations about racism, and can I control the message? And I'm scared, and will people say the wrong thing and offend each other? But it's like, you know, you have to do it, because otherwise our people of color are bearing the brunt, right? Because they're getting calls from all their white friends like, oh, I feel really upset and I want to talk to someone, you know what I mean? So it's like we have to create a space for everyone to have that conversation and get that emotion out, or we're actually burdening specific employees unfairly, I think.
That's right.
I don't know, Jerry, what do you have thoughts on unconscious bias and how it impacts us at work?
I mean, we're human, right? So, you know, we're a function of how we grew up, the circumstances that shaped our lives. And, you know, for a lot of folks that I worked with throughout my career, they just didn't have the same experience as me. You know, I grew up in the Bronx, and, you know, later moved to Brooklyn during the crack era. There just wasn't very many folks that dealt with a lot of the things that I dealt with. I mean, I remember seeing crack vials on the floor around my neighborhood. That's something that was very regular. I remember at one point my family lived above a storefront on a very busy intersection and they were dealing drugs out of a corner store, bodega. I don't know if you guys call it that in outside of New York City, but like a regular convenience store, I would say. So, when folks come and say, hey, Jerry, where are you subbing this year? I don't even know what that means. I'm like Googling it, trying to figure out what does that mean. Where am I subbing? I'm, hanging out home. It's a different culture. So obviously those types of experiences shape who you are, better or worse. And, I've had so many folks that I've worked with that went to schools that were either 100% white or had very few blacks or interacted with very few blacks. And a lot of their perception of who we are and what we do and what we are is shaped by television, unfortunately. So a lot of those biases are brought into the workplace, and unfortunately, we have to deal with a lot of the consequences of what those issues are.
All right, I've got a question from the audience for both of you guys. Do you think you would have had the same opportunity to become the CFO of your organization if you came from outside the organization? I ask because they would know who you were as opposed to the black man they would stereotype. This is a great question.
Well, I think in my case, I did come from the outside, maybe not originally, but and I would say, to the point, part of what has helped me along the way, it has been, I've had sponsors of all colors, including my predecessor as Chief Financial Officer at General Mills, who early on championed my cause, and he brought me in explicitly to groom me as a successor. So I have to say absolutely yes, because that has been my experience. But at the same time, I have to look at the statistics, which, I think the last time Spencer Stewart did a study on CFO progression, the statistics were about 13% of the Fortune 500 CFOs were female, about 6.5% were people of color. So, you can extrapolate from that would probably leave the African American or black CFOs somewhere south of 10. And I'm talking 10 nominally, so I can count them on probably one to no more than two hands. And so, that's sort of the reality. And the frankly, the thing that has to change is, I can get out and talk about diversity. I can get out and talk about the murder of George Floyd or whatever my employees are bringing, and those things are really important. But it is also super important that for me as an employee, because I'm also an employee of this company, that my CEO got out there very quickly, along with the other CEOs of the Minneapolis area, and was talking about this. And that has such a huge signaling factor for not only your employees of color, but also your white employees. They're like, okay, well, this person in a position of power who lives in my neighborhood also cares about this issue. So it isn't just some issue that is, it is distant from me. And that, I have to say, is super important for you as you think about career development. It's important to have a network of sponsors and allies, not just fellow African Americans who I think you absolutely need in your network, but also, yes, white males, because they are in positions of power, and they are more often than not, they make up the majority of people who are in the room when decisions get made. And I would love to tell you otherwise, but I actually think that's still the reality of where we are. And I think it's a good thing for you to have a broad and diverse network. There's one thing that I would tell anybody that has probably helped me most. It's been that.
Jerry, do you have an answer for that one?
Yeah, I would confidently say I would not. And see, Kofi has the benefit of the statistics on Fortune 500 companies. I work for a non-public, tech company. The majority of the C-suite hires that you see are, even the way you source candidates is there's bias in that process. There's tons of bias in the actual hiring process itself. For example, most of those positions are not even published, right? So if you're Black or just anyone in general looking for a job, if you go through the typical channels, the LinkedIn's, the Indeeds, or whatever, even a typical run-of-the-mill recruiter, you're not going to find those positions. Most C-suite positions in a VC-backed or PE-backed company are placed through closed networks that the VCs and the PEs control. I don't know who's in them. You try your best to get among the folks that that are within those circles and try to find sponsors within there. But it's a very difficult task to do. I mean, when you look at the makeup of most of the VCs or the PEs, 90% white male, and the majority of them come from two schools, Harvard and Stanford. So when they start to think about how they're going to recruit and bring folks in, I'm fairly certain that they use, you know, the concept of patterns and like, what am I used to seeing? What does a typical CFO look like? What is their typical background? And I can't. I would have to believe that they see themselves being in, most of them have a finance background, that they want fellow Stanford folks and Harvard folks and so on. So I can say very confidently that I don't believe that I would have had a chance. And I think a good part of the reason why I got promoted from within is, like Kofi said, I had internal sponsors that did speak up for me. I spoke up for myself quite a bit as well, but it always, that voice gets amplified times 100 if there's a male white that does that for you as well. So it is actually critical for you as a professional coming up in the world today to make those alliances and partnerships with folks. And there's other times where I've gotten opportunities at Stack Overflow for CFO positions, and it's been because a good friend of mine or a good colleague of mine, you know, outside of work, or a mentor of mine who happened to be, you know, white male, recommended me for something. And that's, you know, and that's where those opportunities have come and gone pretty deep. So it's actually a very good question.
It is a good question. And you guys hit on a lot of key things, right? Like Jerry's comment about that, you know, unconscious bias isn't just about ethnicity or gender, right? I mean, he mentioned the schools, right? That, okay, well, Kofi went to Stanford, so, you know, he must, you know, he can't be that different from us, right? We at least have that in common, and we can feel good about it and still connect to Kofi in that way, right? That there's a lot of different things and different ways that we're sort of putting people in boxes every day and assigning them value or a lack of value that we all, I think, need to learn to sort of control and manage in ourselves, so that we're not doing it to other people and limiting them. But, you know, and Jerry talking about, you know, having to sort of work harder to make the connections if you didn't go to the right schools or if you didn't have those sort of specific indicators. I also love that Kofi talked about the importance of mentorship, and Jerry talked about the importance of sponsorship. I love both of them. I love the difference. I mean, I view the difference as mentorship being about sort of outside your organization, like people who are helping you, giving you advice in your career, you know, introducing you to people, and then sponsorship being that person of power within your organization who you make their priorities your priority, right? Like your success, you know, brings them success. And so they have a reason and skin in the game to help you and move you along in your career. I know that Brant is active in mentoring through NABA, the National Association of Black Accountants. Are you guys, I know it sounds like you've both benefited from mentoring. Are you sort of passing on that benefit, and do you see a benefit to reaching out to young people?
For me, absolutely. I mentor two folks, a couple of them that are on I asked to actually join this call just to engage in, you know, this type of conversation. I think it's critical for us. And I think, you know, when you think about NABA's motto is lifting as we climb, so you always want to give back and pay it forward to some degree.
Absolutely. And I would say I I'm a big believer in my obligation, my commitment to both mentor and sponsor. And it's probably tilting more towards sponsorship now that I'm sitting at the head of a function. But along the way, I have seen people through all stages of my career who were maybe a couple of levels behind me who I have invested in, either through coaching and development or pushing them sometimes to think about things that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise. I certainly, early in my career, if you had asked me, do you want to be a public company, Fortune 500 CFO? First, if I could even describe what one was, I would have said, no, I don't think I can do that. And in part, the benefit of having mentors is they can see the potential. They can also tell you the stuff that you need to go do in order to be ready and to be competitive. So I view that as a huge responsibility of mine in my organization. But I also spend a lot of time with people I meet frankly, on LinkedIn through informally just networking, even in the Twin Cities area. And I'm investing time in people who I think have talent and who I think are earnestly trying to improve themselves, because I see that as part of my responsibility.
Awesome. Yeah. So if anyone joined today looking for ways that they can be a part of a solution, I think we'd all recommend sort of mentoring and sponsorship. You can be of any color, any gender, right? You can be purple or, orange, but, you can mentor or sponsor African-American students, young people, and make a real difference and impact in their lives. And as I understand that NABA does have a organized program, so that's, you could reach out through NABA if you were looking for an organized program to participate in. So, all right, I've got another question. This is another good one. As you think back, what is one piece of feedback that you received that had a profound impact in shaping your success?
Mm-hmm.
I can answer that real quick, and Kofi touched on it. And it's interesting because he said that he always had to be conscious of how he reacted and his ability to get upset or angry. And that's something that I've had to work on throughout my entire life. I assume I have a tendency to speak loudly, but I'm always accused somehow or another of being overly emotional or loud. And it's just, that's just how we grew up in the house and we spoke. And it's typically no malice associated with it. I think most people that have worked with me just look at me as a big teddy bear that sometimes happens to speak loudly. And I'm being, there's a little tongue in cheek there, but at the same time, not everybody perceives it that way. I think when you get to know me, then you're like, okay, great. Like Jerry's harmless. Like he he doesn't mean anything. But at the same time, I don't think everyone that's in the room feels the same way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I've seen that one just even as I've been working over my career in talent discussions about people of color, in particular Black males, where the things you hear aren't necessarily performance related; they're adjacent to this nebulous area of style and. Oh yeah, he's really loud and scary, okay. So then, one of my jobs I view as a leader is to, okay, let's dial in on that. Why is that? Well, he talks really loudly. Okay, yeah, so does Jeff over there in accounts payable. Let's talk about Jeff. Why is it okay for Jeff, and why is Jerry an issue, right? I mean, I think people are okay. You don't necessarily go in the front door, because people shut down if you make it, to your point, Sarah, about race off the bat, because nobody, look, the good prevailing goodness of people is that nobody wants to be racist. They view it as a bad thing. That's actually good. The problem that creates is a certain level of defensiveness when you have to deal with some of these issues of bias that because you've seen and experienced them, that are rooted in race. And what you don't want is that defensive reaction. You want to keep people open to, okay, well, yeah, I can re-examine the way I'm thinking about this. So I think that's a challenge. For me in my career, some of the advice, probably the most impactful piece of advice I got was about the relationship between moving up and broadening. And so I had early on started out in Treasury and the Treasury Development Program at Ford Motor Company, and I was moving quickly up, and I was very focused on the moving up the ladder as quickly as possible. And I took a couple promotions in a couple years, and one of my mentors looked at me and he just said, if you want to be a CFO, you actually should not have taken that last promotion. I thought it was the most ludicrous thing I'd ever heard, right? What you mean, don't take a promotion? Well, of course you can take a promotion. Who doesn't take a promotion? And the analogy he used was, look, you're telling me you want to be a general contractor, but you've been studying to be a master electrician, and you are almost certified as a master electrician, and now you want to be the general contractor on a house. Because all the people you're going to be competing with are almost general contractors. So why would I go hire a master electrician who wants to practice being a general contractor? You need to be thinking about this. And that really got me to rethink my priorities. And what that meant was I had to get comfortable seeing a bunch of my peers that I joined the company with keep moving up while I did this for a while. And that was hard. I will tell you it's probably the best decision I made in my career, because it better prepared me to do a broader suite of things.
Ooh, yeah, the importance of the lateral move to moving up and taking risks, I would argue too. Okay, I've got another question. Have you experienced some converts in your professional setting? A convert being someone who had a stereotypical view towards you, but changed after they got to know you and or see your capabilities.
That's like every day. Every day. I mean, it's one of those things that, like, from people that you get promoted. When I've gotten hired in from other positions, I've had like counterparts come to me and say, hey, when I saw you on paper, man, I didn't think you deserved the job. And then they come back and say, I understand why you got the job over me, or things like that. I've had board members say things like that, folks that was like, apologized over saying certain things or doing certain things that have come around once they get to know you and see how you've actually added value to an organization. So it happens virtually every day. I think the expression of their mistake, it varies from person to person. Not everyone always is as upfront about saying, hey, I underestimated you, or I prejudged you incorrectly. But it happens almost every day.
Yeah, and I mean, it's probably a natural part of your to my earlier point about you're always walking into spaces where you're further up you go, the fewer people there are that look like you. So you are defying expectations already. And the gravity of those expectations is rooted somewhere in the mix of you don't belong here, or I don't know if you're qualified, or you're always hypersensitive. I'm always hypersensitive to those things, certainly. And I feel it's really important for me to dispel and any doubts about my ability to be there. And I have made it a point not to apologize, and also not to get offended when people come and say that, because I've heard variants of what Jerry's flagged. And certainly one answer can be, oh, what do you mean? You didn't think I had any skills? And you can certainly get super defensive about it. But I think that the more productive thing is to actually engage in a conversation about what was it you didn't think I was capable of doing, and what changed your mind, or what were the things that you saw that you were really helpful, because it actually gives you a sense of, as you're mentoring people who are going to have to go through the same challenges, what are some of the things that they might have to deal with along the way. So it's worth engaging in conversation.
It also might be a gift to that person, right? I mean, you might be giving a gift to that person in walking them through it and making them think about it a little more.
That's right. That's right.
Oh. Okay, we have a couple questions about how to go about finding a mentor. And how do you approach promoting yourself for a chance at a higher position role without coming across as too aggressive or ambitious? That's a really good question.
Wow. You got a couple questions in there.
Those are two really good questions.
I'm gonna let you go first, Kofi.
Yeah, well, let me start on the mentor one first. I would say a good, if you looked at my network of mentors, it is comprised of a lot of former managers who can, who understand me because they worked with me, and a few former peers, colleagues in other industries, who have, I think, a vantage point because you see a lot of companies, so things like bankers, in my case. So, there are lots of places you can connect. I think the thing I would encourage people not to do is mystify a mentor as this exalted formal position where you need to slide a job spec across the table. It's a place where you go to get advice from somebody you trust on various topics, right? And that's it, right? Yeah, so the qualifications for that might be they know this particular industry and they know somebody or you frankly have some chemistry. That actually is probably as important as anything, and you trust their advice. So this isn't something where you need to go on to LinkedIn and put a post that says, I'm looking for mentors, please attach your CV and a 50-word essay on why you'd be a good mentor for me. I wouldn't make it that.
I think Kofi, you make a ton of good points there. I never thought about it that way, but that's actually how I've done it. And like when I've gone through my career and I noticed someone was really good at something, and it could be something as silly as, hey, that guy's really good at stock options. He's just rattling off all the rules and the tax consequences and the gap stuff and all this stuff. And I just mentally make a note, and I'm like, hey, if I have a question about something, I'm gonna tap this Brent, and I'll stay in touch with him. Right. So it might be, and we joked about this when we were preparing for this call, but at Stack that's before COVID, we serve lunch in our office every day. So I could always bribe folks with catered lunch prepared by chefs in our office. I say, hey, come by, I want to catch up, and I'm rattling off a bunch of questions about something I may or may not, understand really well. It's folks that I've that were my former managers, and it's actually very informal. I never went to anyone who was like, "Hey, I'm looking for a mentor. Do you mind like we meet every week and do it?" No, I would just stay in touch with them, and if there's times where I'm like, "Hey, what are you doing? You want to catch a drink?" And this was again pre-pandemic. I would bribe them with beer or whatever I could to pick their brain on the topic. And if not, I just say, hey, do you have 15 minutes? Can you chat? And most of the time you can grab people and you stay in touch. And folks, I don't know, I've generally found that folks do want to help and they do want to mentor. And the majority of folks that I know in accounting, they love hearing themselves talk. So I
have no comment.
That is a truism right there. People love to talk about themselves, agreed. So anywhere you can engage someone to talk about themselves is going to be a winner.
What was the second question?
The second question was, how do you approach promoting yourself for a chance at a higher position or role without coming across as too aggressive or ambitious?
Yeah, look, I think this is, it is okay to give yourself permission to have ambition. And there are a couple of different places where I think I have counseled people to not waste development discussions as an opportunity to pre-express interest in promotional opportunities and the types of promotional opportunities. That's like, if you are at a company where you do formal development discussions, great, you already have a pre-programmed venue once in the year where it is absolutely okay to go in and say, this is what I want to do with my career. This is the help I need from you and the company. And if you don't, it's okay to put one of those or a couple of those on your manager's schedule and to schedule time to do it in a structured fashion. So that's the first thing. Don't make that a rote throwaway exercise where you go in and say, I just want to grow and I'm interested in adding value. Absolutely. If that's your thing, great. But if you want to get promoted, don't be shy about saying, I would like to get to the next level. There's a time frame. I'd like to get some feedback on kind of what things you think I need to be ready for a job like this. That's a way into a conversation about, hey, I'm interested in this job. You remember we had that conversation 4 months ago in my development discussion. I'm interested in this job that just got posted or that's coming open, and I'd like some feedback on how competitive you think I'd be, or what things I need to think about if I'm going to go for it. I think you have to be comfortable having some ambition, and if you wait for it to come to you, I suspect you will very frequently be sitting on sidelines disgruntled because somebody else less qualified than you, or that you didn't think deserved it, or who maybe just wanted it more, got it. And that's the sad reality of this, is a lot of times just wanting it and being visible about wanting it is enough, because there's a lot of qualified people in the organization, but there aren't always a lot of qualified people who come forward and say, yeah, I want that. Yeah. And I'm not afraid to go for it, and maybe not get it, but I think there's no shame in that. Because even if you don't get that one, then people know, okay, yeah, Jerry's ambitious. He's interested in doing some big things, and he may not have been the best fit for that, but I'm gonna think about Jerry next time because he interviewed really well for this job.
And that's especially good advice for women. We have a tendency to think that we shouldn't, that ambition will make us, look like the witch with a bee. But I mean, I guess my advice would be like, never hesitate to go for it, because again, because of unconscious biases, the manager may be thinking you want to have babies, and that somehow women with babies don't have career,
Yep.
aspirations. So you actually have to tell him, like, this is what I want. You have to tell them, because otherwise they'll make assumptions and it might be completely wrong.
Right. Yeah, I do think that's the instance that you don't want to be shy. You want to talk about it. I do think that millennials do this really well. That there's plenty of people that have been on my team that after 2 months, it's like, hey Jerry, yeah, I've been doing this thing, and I think I got it. I think I'm ready for the next level. What do you say about a promotion? Or I've interviewed people and I say, hey, what are your career aspirations? And they're like, I want your job. That's what I want to do. And they look at you dead in the face and you're like, all right, that guy's ambitious. He really wants to, get my job. It depends on how I feel that day. That may or may not go over well, but a good part of when you do deliver that message is how you come across. And I can give you an analogy. It's a sports analogy, but I think folks can get it. It's like, when I played football, if 2 games passed and I didn't get in to the game, I could go to the coach and just say, hey, man, why are you not playing me? Like, I understand. I'm one of the best receivers here. I should be in the game. We lost because you didn't play me. Maybe, I don't know. Or I could go in and say, hey, coach, I didn't get any playing time, last two games. How can I contribute? Like, tell me, is there any gaps you have in the defense or in the offense? How can I contribute to winning? And you get a different reaction when you approach it from that standpoint. And it's like just basically saying, hey, how can I get to the next level? What are you missing in your department? Or like, how do you see, and force your manager to essentially build out that path for you. And obviously in the most polite way possible to just have them, because these are things that you shouldn't have to worry about as a member of the team. Like, comp is not you should be worrying about. Like, I don't think I get paid fairly. You should work that out. Or if you don't know what it takes to get to the next level, or you're afraid to ask because you don't know or what the reaction will be, you have to put yourself out there and not be shy about it. I can tell you that the white folks on my team are doing it. I mean, I'll be very, very blunt about it. Yep. The white men on my team, they have no problems looking me in the eye and saying, hey, I need you to tell me how I get here. Tell me, put it on a piece of paper for me. I want to know.
Yeah.
And they're not shy about it. And I'm not mad at them. I actually think it's the right way to go. Hold me as a manager accountable to make sure you're successful in your career. I think that's, and if that manager doesn't support that and doesn't put it on paper and doesn't create that path, then you have your answer. You know, it's time.
Well, and you also know you have to be comfortable trying and maybe not getting it too, and that's okay, because that's part of the process. I do think I have seen, to your point, Sarah, women and people of color feel that they needed to have a lot more qualifications, be perfectly qualified and perfectly fit a description in ways that I haven't seen from frankly from my white male colleagues. And I'm not, and to Jerry's point, that's not something to be mad about. That just is. And I think that's a function of maybe the societal messaging and people sort of internalizing things that aren't necessarily right. Because I think if you play, I say just go play and run at the thing you want, and you will learn something in the process. Either that you are readier than you think, and they think you're ready, or you aren't as ready and you've got something to go work on that will get you ready, or that this is maybe not the place for you to work because they're never going to see you as ready. Those are all things you can learn. Those are all useful, and you are in control of your career because you are now an active agent as opposed to waiting for something to come to you.
Yeah. With such a low percentage of Black CPAs, obviously the accounting field has a pipeline problem. Do you have any brilliant ideas for how we can address it so that if we have this conversation again in 5 or 10 years, we will have better news to share? I saw that in July there was the announcement of the newly formed National Society of Black CPAs, which is amazing, and their focus, it sounds like, is going to be narrower than NABA, that they're really focused on bringing Blacks to the CPA and accounting profession. Any thoughts on what we can do so that, to affect real change and really increase numbers?
Yeah, I'll throw out a couple of thoughts. I do think the value of hitting people in high school, especially for the accounting profession, is really not to be underestimated. Because if you think about accounting and accounting preparation, a lot of that happens in undergrad, and frankly, a lot of people who are going into school, it's either some mix of liberal arts or engineering, and accounting and finance to a lesser extent, but accounting specifically, there is a specific preparation you need to do to be ready. So hitting somebody by the time they're already a junior or even late in their sophomore year is too late. So if I were working this problem as a member of the CPA orders, that's where I would go, and start influencing people about what the accounting profession is. I mean, it offers a lot of the same things that engineering does, with less complicated math. So I think there's already a lot to sell it.
I don't know. I don't have a silver bullet, to be honest. I think there's a ton of reasons why Black folks don't go into accounting. And at the same time, I mean, I've been at non-profit conferences, seen thousands of Black folks. So I don't know. I'm a little torn mentally as to if it is a problem. I get the CPA numbers. Those are a fact, and I'm not going to dispute those. But at the same time, I just, it's almost like a chicken or the egg, because I think folks don't see other individuals in the community going that route. So it's hard for them to imagine themselves in those professions. So it's something that we have to create more awareness around it. And it does, like Kofi said, start in high school, because there are tons of opportunities within that field. There's so many things that you can actually do with accounting finance background. So, and more and more folks with those types of backgrounds are highly coveted in large organizations. So in a number of different roles, not just in a finance role. So I think awareness is definitely something that we should focus on.
Yeah, I think you're right. Exposure, right? I mean, just, exposing kids to who accountants are and what they do, right? And there's a broad swath of what that is. And it's not just a guy in a pocket protector, working a calculator all day, right? That there's lots of opportunities and cool things that you can do with an accounting degree. So yeah, definitely. And accounting firms, I think, should play a strong role. I mean, we at Armanino are trying to play a strong role, but I do think I think accounting firms should take a leadership role in some of those efforts. So we'll keep working on it. Well, thank you so much. I really want to thank Kofi, Jerry, and Brant, and thanks to all of our attendees for being here. A couple quick words about Controllers Council and some save the dates on upcoming events. So Controllers Council is a national community of accounting and finance professionals focused on best practices, resources, and training, peer interaction, recognition, and career services. There's some links and information to the website, which is controllerscouncil.org. And there's lots of membership and community feature benefits, including professional certification. Oh, there's my dog. And then finally, here's some save the dates for upcoming Controllers Council events. And like I said, this event will be sent by email and shared on the Controller Council website. That's controllerscouncil.org. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Appreciate the time.
Good to meet you guys. Take care.